Stay tuned. Ahead, I'll talk with Dr. Meredith Gansner about teen depression gone viral, why kids are more vulnerable than ever, and how you can protect your child's health and happiness. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. Dr. Meredith Gansner is an attending child psychiatrist at Boston Children's Hospital, an instructor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. Her award-winning research focuses on adolescent mental health and problematic digital media use. Dr. Gansner, welcome to Some Books Considered.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Now, there have been a lot of books written about adolescent depression. What sets yours apart from those others?
This book came about because I felt as though most books, especially within the last 10 years that have been written on adolescent depression, they didn't quite capture the extent to which social media and the internet have sort of invaded, I think, our understanding of psychiatric illness and the way that especially teenagers come to understand their symptoms and understand treatment for psychiatric illness. And so this book was written to try to illustrate that no matter what point you're at during a depressive episode, and no matter who you are within a depressive episode, right, even if you are a parent or guardian, it's always relevant to be thinking about how what you read online and what you see online could impact your own understanding of your child's psychiatric illness and also can impact the child's understanding of their own psychiatric illness and symptoms. And so trying to keep that mindset throughout the whole course of the illness, and also finding ways to lean on newer digital technologies to have some benefit in terms of treating symptoms and helping teens get through a depressive episode.
Well, there's so much in this book that we can only scratch the surface here. Let's go back to the problem. I mean, you've done a lot of research about the impact of digital media on adolescents. So as a parent, you may think, well, my kid may or may not be depressed. Some of this might just be normal teen behavior. How do you tell the difference and know when you might need to intervene?
Yeah, I think this is especially tricky now that teens are oftentimes more face-to-face with their devices to engage with the outside world. So whereas before, parents might have seen that their child wasn't hanging out as much with their friends and seen that as abnormal, now if they're on their phones all the time, parents might assume, oh, okay, well, they're just hanging out with their friends online, right? It's not abnormal. This is something that they just do nowadays, as normal teenagers do. So I think really parents know their kids better than anybody else. And so I think there is a part of parents that registers that the way that their child is acting is not kind of the normal degree of either kind of irritability, which is a significant symptom for teen depression specifically, or the kind of the normal degree of sarcasm or terrible sleep habits. Those are all things that we know are symptoms of psychiatric illness, especially depression in teens. But they tend to take a bit of a darker tone and get more significant, more frequent, more severe when the child is depressed rather than it being sort of normal adolescence. And I think, just if parents are worried that their child is depressed and they see that, they're on their phones all the time, it could be also worth just checking in with the child and seeing what they're doing online, because certainly a child that is more engaged with their friends online or doing a meaningful activity on their phones or devices, that is more encouraging in terms of them functioning well than if they're just scrolling through social media platforms.
So there's so much that a kid could be involved with online. And I guess there's also matters of trust here. Because, if you're constantly trying to monitor what the child is doing, you can actually get the opposite result than what you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, a huge issue because parents, again, this goes back to, how media is interplaying with our own understanding of our child's illness, right? That parents see online all the time on our own social media platforms, teen depression due to social media use, or, children who spend this amount of time online are going to become depressed. And so I think parents themselves start to get very anxious about what it means for their child to be using social media or using the internet as much as they are. And so, absolutely, I caution parents to try to take a step back and understand that a lot of those headlines, they are certainly grounded in some research, but they are alarmist, and that there is no, to this point, any evidence that with absolutely no uncertainty, we can say depression is caused by social media use. That's not something that we have the research to prove at this point. Absolutely, it can exacerbate depression symptoms, for sure. It's probably a bidirectional relationship, but there's no evidence to say this absolutely is a horrible, bad thing that no teenager should be using. And I think if parents can calm themselves down enough to recognize that, and that there might be aspects of their child's use that are healthy and could be actually providing them some benefit, then that is probably a better way to start than if they go in from the offensive of like, tell me what you're doing right now and what are you doing online, or just going through every single action that they take online. That is so hard for a teenager who's trying to come into their own as an individual person, right? That has their own feelings and their own needs and needs some privacy as well. And certainly we want to make sure that the child is being safe. But I think that if the parent can come from a point of curiosity rather than interrogation, that's a really good place to start.
One of the things you point out in the book that there are many different causes of depression, and you talk about in the body versus out of the body. So tell us a little bit about that.
Admittedly, and this is another point where I think sometimes what we see online can be misleading, there really isn't 100% great understanding of what exactly is happening inside the body when a person becomes depressed or has a depressive episode. We have lots of kind of signals in the body that we know are kind of flaring when someone is depressed, like people are more likely to show signs of inflammation. And we know that there are some chemicals called neurotransmitters, which are chemical messengers in our body that can be sort of awry in terms of their levels. But we don't think anymore, and we used to, that serotonin was the one chemical that made all the difference in depression. And it definitely does play a role, but it's certainly not the only part of kind of the complicated mechanism that creates a depressive episode. And so kind of taking a step back and then trying to understand like what that would look like, to the outsider, outside the body, that is more of what parents really need to be focusing in on and trying to identify a depressive episode, right? There's no test or imaging to this point that can absolutely say with full certainty a person is depressed. So you're going to be reliant on kind of a sort of a roadmap of symptoms to look for and to try and understand from your child. And so again, irritability, trouble with sleep, too much, too little appetite. Sometimes there can also be kind of binge eating or eating too much, feelings of hopelessness and guilt, not enjoying what one used to enjoy, and certainly thoughts of not wanting to be alive anymore, or even acts of suicide. Those are all extreme warning signs for a depressive episode.
I'm talking with Dr. Meredith Gansner about teen depression gone viral, why kids are more vulnerable than ever, and how you can protect your child's health and happiness. And our conversation continues in a moment. If you appreciate this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. Kind of a two-part question here, and I realize you could spend a long time answering either part, but I guess the first part is, what can parents do when they suspect that their child is going through depression? And kind of the second part of that is, at what point do you need professional help?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to answer the second part first, and that I don't know that one always absolutely needs professional help, but I do think that help is something that every parent needs when their child is going through a depressive episode. I think parents may used to have wanted to kind of keep it to themselves and keep it within the family due to the stigma of psychiatric illness. And I still see that occasionally. But it is so challenging when your child is depressed. And when parents try to tackle it all by themselves without looking for help, even if it's just help from family members or close friends, then it becomes, I think, far easier for them to get burned out and to fall into the sort of frustration of why isn't my child getting better? We've tried to do everything possible to make it easier for them. We've gotten rid of their chores, right? They don't have as much that they're held responsible for. And unfortunately, that's a very normal trap to fall into, but it's problematic because it also allows the teen to fall into a pattern of avoidance. And that's absolutely what you don't want when your child is depressed. And so I'll say, I think right off the start, figuring out other people that can help you in your family, friends, community, but then thinking outside that, when it's to the point where you are feeling overwhelmed, that you don't know what next step to take, it's never a wrong time to reach out for professional help. And unfortunately, it's not always easy to get professional help, right? There are significant waiting lists around the country to try to get therapists and psychiatrists. But I think you can never go wrong reaching out for someone else to provide support because parents are the most important person for their child during this illness. And if that relationship starts to fracture even more because parents are getting so frustrated and burned out, then that's going to only lead to further symptoms. So it's really important that parents reach out as soon as possible to get assistance because they really need to know they're not alone in this.
You also point out in the book that the parent may recognize that the child is depressed, but the child might deny that and say, no, I'm not. So then what do you do?
Yeah, it's an age-old issue, right? Saying that you're this to a teenager and they're like, absolutely not. And the sky is blue. It is not blue. This has become more common now too when teenagers have turned to social media platforms to try to understand their feelings and their symptoms. I think there's more of a tendency now to say either they're not depressed at all or that they might have a different psychiatric illness that they've read about online. And in those situations, I would encourage not, pushing back against it and saying, no, you're definitely depressed. I write in the book that, when I first started psychiatry and treating children, it was so tempting to just read through the diagnoses and the criteria and say, well, but you have this and you have this. And that was always absolutely a failure. I mean, I don't think any teenager said to me, wow, yeah, you're absolutely right. And so trying to understand from the teenager where they're at in terms of if they feel like certain things aren't the way that they should be, and most often you can find something that they aren't feeling quite 100% good about, and sometimes that's relationships with others, sometimes that's their sleep, whatever you can find to try to gain their trust and get them to get some significant help with that first, get some buy-in, and then you may be better able to kind of get them a better understanding of, what depression is and what that means. And certainly this is also an area where social media and the internet can be potentially helpful because there are resources online that will show other teenagers who have experienced depression. And so just seeing what that looks like and seeing that it's not something that they should be ashamed of, I think that is a significant benefit to have from the internet. So there are a few benefits from the internet for sure.
I'm curious about the scope of the problem here. And has it gotten worse because of the world in which we live in now, or are we just doing a better job of reporting it so it seems like there's more?
I think it's both. We know that people are now more aware of depression as an illness, and I think there has been some progress made in destigmatizing the illness such that people will more openly say, I'm having a depressive episode or I'm having these symptoms. I also know that there are many more clinicians now who are screening for depression in adolescents. Universal screening in adolescents is recommended in the United States for teenagers to make sure that we're not missing depression. But I also think that there are aspects of the society that we live in now that can potentially be, more depressive inducing than perhaps before, right? And so, again, I absolutely can say there is no hardcore evidence saying that depression is caused by device use and social media, full stop, alone. But that being said, there are many parts of wellness that we give up when we become more dependent on our devices. And we know that those factors like decreased sleep, not eating as well, not going outside, right, to get fresh air, to get vitamin D from the sun. Those things, when they start to kind of take a backseat to device use, that is a sort of perfect storm with genetics and other stressors to create a depressive episode. And so I think all those factors combined, right, the increased screening, perhaps the decreased stigma, but also the fact that more people are now kind of stationary and device connected, I think those can all be attributed to causing depression a little bit more maybe than before in teens.
Are there things we can do to educate teens, perhaps even ourselves, about smart social media use to be preventative, to hopefully stave off, a depressive episode that's maybe been made worse by social media?
That's a really great point, because I think researchers have tended to focus on how this process of social media contagion, and again, it's not really contagious as a virus, but it does seem sometimes like behaviors kind of spread through seeing them on the internet in online communities. And we know that does happen in real life communities, but it seems to also happen online. But there's also evidence that this sort of social media contagion process could be beneficial, and that we probably could be doing more to try to spread information about how platforms work, right? Like how social media algorithms work to keep you engaged, to keep you, holding your phone and glued to your device. I think if we did better from a public health standpoint and trying to teach from an early age, even elementary school kids, how they feel when they're on their device for long periods of time, how they can stay safe online, just kind of, we call it digital literacy. If we could do a better job trying to spread that message online and taking different intervention techniques, that would actually maybe go a long way. The problem is that we haven't been pouring much research into studying those to see if those are actually efficacious techniques. So some people have done them with things like vaccines and trying to promote other public health interventions using the internet and social media platforms, but we haven't seen it quite as much with psychiatric illness and depression. But I think that could be a tremendous opportunity for sure.
Well, there's much more in this book that we didn't have time to talk about, so if you'd like to learn more, the book is Teen Depression Gone Viral: Why Kids Are More Vulnerable Than Ever and How You Can Protect Your Child's Health and Happiness. It's by Dr. Meredith Gansner. Dr. Gansner, thank you very much for talking with me today.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you'd like to purchase Teen Depression Gone Viral, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you appreciate this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.